Before I get started with this story, shout out to BlackJack21 on Instagram for sending me this story. So you have this Lin-Manuel Miranda knockoff. In this picture, of course, you can tell where he was on this day. He was a participant in the January 6th insurrection, riot, invasion, however you want to call it. Because it definitely wasn't a tourist attraction like they want to claim that it was. I can't believe they even fixed them out to say that even with all of their privilege. But anyway, this guy right here, he made history today. He, as far as I know, he's gotten the lengthiest jail sentence for anybody that has participated in the invasion. A whopping 8 months. I know. It blew my mind to know he got that many months, because I could have sworn he was probably going to get maybe like 8 days or a day or a month or a week, but he got a whopping 8 months. That is groundbreaking. You got to admit, that is some groundbreaking shit. But not only that, he also made history by being the first person that's involved with this thing to be hit with a felony sentencing. Now, of course, y'all can tell that I'm just being straight up sarcastic with all of this, because 8 months is nothing for what they did. And so what? He got a felony sentencing, and they try to make it seem like it's this grandiose thing. It's not. It's it's really not. Like, they trying to make it seem like this is something incredible. It's not. But his name is Paul Hodgkins, and he's 38 years old. He looks like he came from a trailer park and whatever, but let's get into it. A man from Florida, of course, who waved a Trump 2020 flag on the floor on the Senate chamber on January 6th, was sentenced to 8 months in prison Monday, the first time a Capitol riot defendant was sentenced for a felony charge. Makes you wonder, what did he do to get the felony charge? Paul Hodgkins, a 38-year-old crane operator, pleaded guilty last month to one count of obstruction of an official proceeding and acknowledged that he took a selfie and joined a group of rioters who assembled at the front of the Senate chamber with the intention to obstruct the certification of the 2020 presidential election. When announcing the sentence, which was less than the 15 to 21 month sentence recommended when Hodgkins pleaded guilty, Judge Randolph Moss called the Capitol attack an assault on democracy, but said Hodgkins' lack of criminal history and willingness to accept responsibility warranted a lower sentence. See what I mean? This guy went from doing over a year to almost 2 years in jail to doing less than a year. But hey, at least he got felony charges. More sarcasm. Hodgkins' 8-month prison sentence will be followed by 2 years of supervised release. His sentence could signal potential punishments for other Capitol defendants. I won't hold my breath. Prosecutors said earlier this month that nearly 235 defendants had been charged with the same crime to which Hodgkins pled guilty. It appears the entire nation will be tuning in, Hodgkins' lawyer Patrick LeDuc said during Saturday during a phone interview with CBS News. LeDuc asked the court to sentence Hodgkins to home detention only, but prosecutors urged the federal judge to sentence Hodgkins to 18 months in prison. In a sentencing memorandum filed last week, Special Assistant U.S. Attorney Mona Sedkey stressed the need to consider the magnitude of what the riot entailed and signified. Sedkey noted that Hodgkins entered the Senate chamber during a violent riot that engulfed the entire Capitol, which resulted in injuries for more than 100 law enforcement officers and threatened the peaceful transfer of power after the presidential election. The rule of law was not only disrespected, it was under attack that day. A lesser sentence was suggested to the public in general and other rioters specifically that attempts to obstruct official proceedings are not taken seriously. Sedkey acknowledged that Hodgkins had taken significant steps toward rehabilitation and that he didn't personally engage in any violence or destruction of property that day, but she wrote that the government could not ignore the seriousness of his crime. The need to deter others is especially strong in cases involving domestic terrorism, which the breach of the Capitol certainly was, she wrote. Unlike in other Capitol riot criminal cases, prosecutors did not accuse Hodgkins of committing a crime of terrorism, but they did compare his conduct to that of a domestic terrorist, writing that it involved intimidation or coercion, aimed at influencing the conduct of the government. LeDuc rejected the notion that the events on January 6th amounted to domestic terrorism. That was a bridge too far for me, he said, adding that the events of that day involved the protest that got out of hand. BS. Let's keep in mind that 2 people died that day. Just thought they should know. If that guy who hit Heather Heyer back in 2017 in Charlottesville could be seen as a domestic terrorist act, and he got the proper sentencing, then this could be seen as the same thing. Like, they literally want to tiptoe around what this actually was, mainly because of the majority who was there. In a court filing last week, LeDuc compared the prosecution of the events of January 6th to the period of Reconstruction after the U.S. Civil War. Today, the country is as divided as it was in the 1850s, but today, this court has a chance to make a difference, LeDuc wrote. We have the chance to be as Lincoln had hoped, to exercise grace and charity and to restore healing for those who seek forgiveness. Now, we know if this was a black person in this situation, there would be no referencing of Lincoln or the Civil War, even though black people played a significant role in that, but they try to cover that up. But yeah, that's a horse of another color. But no, let me continue. So far, nearly 20 Capitol rioters have entered guilty pleas, and 2 have been sentenced for misdemeanor crimes. One, Anna Morgan Lloyd, was sentenced to 3 years probation and no jail time. I actually did a video about her. And another, Michael Curzio, who was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment, although the courts credited him for nearly 6 months he had already spent incarcerated as he waited for the courts to hear his case. Those who have pled guilty face a wide range of recommended sentences based on their charges, a reminder of the differing allegations against Capitol riot defendants, some of whom have only been charged with misdemeanors, while others could see years in prison for alleged assaults on officers, conspiracy, and weapons crimes. One defendant, Josiah Colt, pled guilty to the same obstruction charge as Hodgkins, but faces a recommended sentencing range of 51 months to 63 months, more than 3 times higher than Hodgkins' original recommended sentence. Unlike Hodgkins, Colt was accused of bringing a cache of weapons and ammunition to D.C. and has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors as they bring cases against 2 co-conspirators. During a statement read in court Monday, Hodgkins said that he felt remorse and shame for entering the Capitol that day. He only feels that because he knows he's about to go to jail. If I had any idea that the protests at the Capitol building would escalate to the levels that they did, or that the charges would be what I have faced since then, he said, I would have never ventured any further than the sidewalk of Pennsylvania Avenue. And there you go. That second part, he just gave it away. If I knew that these charges is what I would get hit with, I wouldn't have done it. In other words, if he knew he wouldn't get charged, he would have still did it. But the fact of the matter is, he went in there and took pictures. Like, this guy has selfies. He has multiple selfies at that. He chose violence that day. They all chose violence that day. Hodgkins said that although he did not engage in violence or theft, his involvement did still contribute to the greater problem that took place. He said, I have also thought at times that the company of us who remained calmer in our protests may have made others feel emboldened to carry out the destruction that occurred. He's doing this because he's embarrassed, and also because he's probably going to lose his job, if he hasn't lost it already. Hodgkins said that since his arrest, he'd spent more than 100 hours volunteering at an animal shelter and food bank and joined a church, and had been and had took the scene against COVID-19. What does him taking the scene have to do with anything? As a matter of fact, what does him doing all of the other stuff have to do with anything? Is he trying to clear a conscience? Like, all of that does not absolve what he did. I'm throwing this back on them because they love to throw this on us. So I'm throwing it even heavier back onto them. It does not matter what you did after the fact. What you did that day is what counts, is what matters. In addition, he said, I wish to state that I completely acknowledge and accept that Joseph R. Biden Jr. is respectfully and rightfully the president of the United States. Why does this sound like it's so scripted? This doesn't even sound like something he came out of his mouth. He used creepy Jim Crow Joe, Mr. Touchy-Feely's full name. I didn't even know his middle name began with an R. I didn't even know he was a junior until this. When announcing his decision, Moss cited the fact that Hodgkins stood beside the dais in the U.S. Senate and raised the Trump 2020 flag. The symbolism of that act, Moss said, was unmistakable. Hodgkins had staked a claim on the floor of the United States Senate, not with the American flag, Moss said, but with the flag that declared his loyalty to a single individual over a nation. Interesting. And see, many of them didn't even get that. Then that would definitely account for several of those who were out there. Moss said that act captured the threat to democracy that we all witnessed that day. Dude, just take your 8 months. At least you only got 8 months compared to how much you were supposed to get. Hell, it's black men in jail right now who has weed charges, who got years. You got 8 months. Consider yourself extremely lucky, and all you had to do was be palm colored, look like you went swimming in a pond, and then take your ass from Florida all the way to DC with a Trump flag and go into the Senate floor and take selfies and act a fool with all your little primate friends. And that's all. And all you got was 8 months out of that. Congratulations. Color me shocked. Color me so surprised. Not surprised, I should say. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments.